Hey there, Mr. Weaver here, and this is 8th grade, Module 11, Lesson 5, Associations in Two-Way Tables. After this lesson, you need to be able to use relative frequencies to determine if an association exists between categories in a two-way table. Let's learn. Associations in two-way tables. You can determine if data suggests that an association exists between two categories in a two-way table by examining the row or column relative frequencies. The two-way table shows the difference in row relative frequencies between the males and females and the sport they prefer. Since the relative frequencies for males are different than the relative frequencies for females, the data suggests that there is an association between gender and sport preference. So here we can see, if we're looking at the data table, looking at our row relative frequencies, 20 out of 80, so 20 out of 80.25 males prefer soccer, 60 out of 80 or 0.75 prefer tennis, 66 out of 120 or 0.55 prefer soccer for females, 54 out of 120 females prefer tennis. So we can use these. If we end up with different values, then we can say that there is an association between. So this is a very different value, 0.25 compared to 0.55. 0.75 is very different than 0.45. When all of them are different, we can say there's an association. If we were to choose a soccer player at random, it is more likely to be female than male, since 0.55 is greater than 0.25. While if we were to choose a tennis player at random, it's more likely going to be male, since 0.75 is greater than 0.45. Based on our row relative frequencies, there may be an association between which gender and which sport. In another two-way table, we can look at the column relative frequencies to determine if males and females play an instrument or if they play a sport. Looking at the data here, we would say there is no association in this column frequency. Males are just as likely to play an instrument as they are to play a sport. Females are just as likely to play an instrument as they are to play a sport. There are more females than males, but that's not what we're asking here. We're asking if they are more likely to play an instrument or play a sport. So since we have the same values, if a male student was chosen at random, they're just as likely to play an instrument as they are to sport, since these two relative frequencies are the same. And for a female, they're just as likely as well to play an instrument or a sport, since their relative frequencies are the same. So if they're the same in what we were trying to figure out, there is no association. Example 1. Use row relative frequencies to determine associations. The two-way table shows how people of different ages get their news. Find the row relative frequencies. Then determine if the data suggests an association between the categories. So this tells us to use row relative frequency. So we don't want our column totals. We want our rows. Let's see if there's an association using the relative frequencies. So let's find our row relative frequencies. 20 out of 90 is going to be 0.22. 70 out of 90 is going to be 0.78. 85 out of 115 comes out to be 0.74. And 30 out of 115 is 0.26. Next, let's determine if there is an association. So we have our completed relative frequencies for the rows. The data suggests that there is an association between their age and their news source. If we were to choose a random person that gets their news from the internet, they're more likely to be under 18. Check your understanding, read through the situation, and use the table to answer both parts. Pause the video now and complete this check. Let's check. First, let's fill in our relative frequencies. So we are dealing with row relative frequencies. So 27 out of 84 is 0.32, 57 out of 84 is 0.68, 31 out of 96 is 0.32, 65 out of 96 is 0.68. Now I want to determine, is there an association between the categories? So if I'm looking closely at my data, I notice these two are the same here, these two are the same, so there would not be an association since our data values are similar. So there's not an association between grade level and movie preference, since the frequencies were the same. A person chosen at random that preferred a comedy movie was just as likely to be in 7th grade as they were in 8th grade. So again, if we're looking at comedy, these two are the same. They have an equal chance of being chosen. drama, these two are the same. There's an equal chance of them being chosen. Example 2. Use column relative frequencies to determine associations. This two-way table shows the grade level for a student and the subject they prefer. Find the column relative frequencies, so I don't care about the total for my rows. Then determine if this data suggests an association between our categories. Again, as we've been doing, let's calculate our relative frequencies. So 173 out of 275 calculates out to 0.63, 102 out of 275, 0.37. 79 out of 125 and 46 out of 125 give us 0.63 and 0.37. Now let's determine if there's an association between the categories. This data suggests, again, there's no association in our column frequencies since we have the same ratio in each. So if I were to choose a random 7th grader, 0.63 compared to 0.63, they're going to be the same. No association. 8th grade, 3.7 to 3.7, they're the same. They're just as likely to prefer math as they are in language arts. Check your understanding. Read through the situation. Use the table to answer both parts. Pause the video now and complete the check. Check your answer. First, let's find our relative frequencies. So 0.85 for 2 children or less that own a pet, or 0.15 that do not own a pet, 0.43 more than 2 children who own a pet, 0.57 more than 2 children do not own a pet. Next, is there an association between the categories? So if I'm looking at my data values, all of them are different. They're not close to each other. So would there be an association? This data suggests that there is an association between people that own pets and the number of children because those frequencies are different. If we were to choose a person at random that owns a pet, it's more likely that they have 2 children or less in their family. And we can see that if a person owns a pet, they are more likely, 0.85, to have less children than more children.